We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Many years I had accumulated a shoulder injury due to lifting heavy weights back then. You know, this was in high school. And it's kind of interesting because recently this injury's been bothering me for many years. And recently, 2018, my brother, Dr. Boz Moreno, has suggested that I take some of his B Venom, a homeopathic solution he put together. And I was like, yeah, let me try it. Let me see what's up. At first, I was kind of skeptical to the situation, but then at the same time, with its track record, I was like, yeah, he be putting it down when it comes to homeopathic medicines and whatnot, you know, due to the history we have with each other and whatnot. So I was like, yeah, let me get some. So I end up ordering some, read the instructions, what I need to do, how much I need to illustrate within or add to my body or whatever the case may be. So over a 2-month period, I took it. I took injections from every Tuesday, so 4 times a week, 4 times a month. So I took it for 2 months, and after the second month, I noticed that my arm was not hurting anymore. The muscle had repaired itself, literally, you know, and I was like, whoa, let me start sharing this with people, you know, really start giving them an opportunity to check out what's actually involved with B Venom. So tune in. We definitely got some more exciting things. If you're interested in administrating some B Venom, check out our advertisement that we have that's supporting this podcast.
This is Techno Enthusiasts, Seattle's premier geek podcast network.
The German news agency.
We interrupt this program to bring you a news bulletin from Washington. The White House has just announced.
Here is a news bulletin. Shots have reportedly been fired.
Here's another late development, and this news keeps coming in.
This is an NBC News hotline report. Special report. Verdicts, violence. National Guard troops.
We interrupt our program to bring you a special broadcast.
We interrupt this broadcast.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important...
Hotep, and welcome to my sovereign world, where you can find discuss issues on self-empowerment, meditation, self-sustainability living, autonomy, sovereignty, divine law, legalese, and other related issues.
Hotep, and welcome to my sovereign world. I am that I am. Some call me Haru, with my co-host.
People call me Nas. Shalom.
Indeed. So we're just going to get into some conversation, talk about some issues we always talking about, how to live autonomously, as we would say.
Indeed.
But let's get into it, brother.
Well, again, we just wanted to have a conversation, or I should make one of our conversations privy to you. And
yes, indeed.
Because we have these conversations all the time about breaking down the pros and cons of certain things that that have been taught out, or things that we find in law, or and basically how to live autonomously. I mean, there are a lot of people out there that are looking to live what they believe is the sovereign life, and we look at that as well. Sovereign, people have to look at that definition of that term and actually see what it means. And then apply it to their life to see if that's something they actually want to pursue, because there's a difference, and the responsibilities are different. And then the contradictions. I mean, if you want to get into the issue with sovereign citizen.
Oh yes, that's definitely a big issue, especially when we have the elite, so-called the elite, phrasing it really, using that phrase and putting people under that jurisdiction, per se.
Indeed. And, a lot of people don't realize that there are different definitions of the term of many terms. I mean, if you look in a dictionary, you see a lot of terms that say one, have definition 1, 2, and sometimes all the way down to 15, 20. Matter of fact, there was an entire book written on a definition of include. So, but, you know, going back to citizen, as one of the definitions of citizen is a subject. And so how are you going to be a ruling or a law-making subject? You know, that's a contradictory in a phrase within itself. It's like having a blue-red sky. You know what I mean? It just doesn't quite go together. You know, they're opposite. So, you know, we have to look at those things. And that term comes from, you know, as you were so eloquently stated before, is that it comes from, you know, the time frame in the 80s and 90s when, you know, people were so fed up with how the government was moving that they had their own sovereign movement, if you want to call it, a movement of the people. And you know, we have those throughout the decades, power to the people movements and whatnot. And this particular one, or this particular time, a lot of the Montana Freemen and Posse Comitatus and so forth, a lot of them, you know, lost their freedoms because they were, to me, tricked into stepping beyond the realm of sovereignty and doing certain things within commerce or certain things within commerce that were actually illegal. You know, that were illegal, and you're right, and that's what made them. When people don't get that there is a line that someone can cross, that by you crossing that line, they have the right, or at least the privilege, to make a presumption on your status. So for example, if you go into a traffic court and say, you know, you answer a ticket. Let's say you get a ticket get pulled over and you get a ticket, and you go in there to say, hey, I'm not guilty. I'm driving. I wasn't driving. Driving means this, blah blah blah. Well, by you stepping in there without qualifying your actions, you've allowed them to presume that you are acting within commerce. Period. And just because you go in and say, well, driving means this and that means that, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything to that judge, because he's saying what you're saying to him what you believe or what you state, and the other side is in disagreement or hasn't stated that they agree to it. So.
Indeed.
Right. So I mean, you can take it from there. But the point is that we discern ourselves. We know the differences between the actions that can take you across that line, and actions that where you maintain your autonomy. And again, that's
and that's key. And that's key, because a lot of us, like I say, most of us ain't even really trying to. We want to try to act like we're responsible, but we're not acting accordingly. Right. And that's the problem. We're not acting as if we were so-called sovereign or autonomous, independent.
And let's qualify that for people. What does that mean? Because, you tell people to do their own research, and then that's smart. That's very smart. But sometimes a lot of people are intimidated. They don't know where to start. When you look at the realm of statutes, and there's millions of statutes. So where do I start?
Indeed.
You know what I mean? Well, start with the source. The source of government power is what? The people. And how is that source regulated or conveyed over to government? It's regulated and conveyed over by the Declaration of Independence and the constitutions, regardless of whether it's state or the U.S. Constitution. Now, one other thing that people forget about, there's another source, is each state has an enabling act, and in those enabling acts, it tells the states what their conditions of entering into statehood or entering into the union as a state entail. And those states have to follow those conditions, because if I say, if we get into an agreement, you say, look, man, I want you to give me $50 or, whatever the case is. And I say, well, I'll do that on the condition that you come cut my yard. You know what I mean? Just hypothetically. And if you don't want to do that condition, or you agree to that condition, and let's say every month or every 2 months you want $50. Well, if you stop cutting my yard, then I go back and pull up that agreement and say, well, look, I don't owe you $50, because our condition is that if you wanted $50 from me, you were going to cut my yard. You stopped cutting my yard 5 years ago. I'm not giving you $50 anymore. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing with the enabling acts. It's like, look, what we don't realize is that these states, and you do want to differentiate between federal and a state. Federal territory and jurisdiction, and a state territory and jurisdiction. And the reason why is because, we'll get into that in a minute, but the enabling acts, again, regulate how the state can move forward in the realm of their power, right? And so what a lot of states do is they overstep those bounds. And I'll give you an example. Traffic laws. Traffic laws are an overstepping of the bounds of state government because who pays for the roads? Here in Washington, for example, we pay for the roads by a gas tax. Yes. Right? I know for example, in some places like New York, they have tolls, and tolls pay for the for the roads. But
like Florida, I would guess Florida too.
Yeah. And they probably have a combination of things, that pay for the roads. But for example, here it's exclusively set that the gas tax is set to pay for the building of the roads. And so, who pays the gas tax?
People.
Yeah, people that go get gas and fill their car
get
up.
Gas.
So exactly, if you get gas, you pay for the roads. So that means if you pay for it, you own it. Remember, the government doesn't own anything; they're the trustee.
Nothing.
Right?
Nothing.
So can the grantor tell the trustee what to do? Yes, they can. The grantor tells the trustee what to do because he sets whoever the trustee, whoever the grantor is, right? Not the grantee, the grantor. Whoever the grantor is the one that sets the rules for the indenture. The trustee doesn't have to agree to those rules or those terms of the indenture. They only have to agree to take the post. They're required to follow the rules or the terms of that indenture. And any police officer that approaches you is approaching you as a trustee. And the minute you let him know that you are not anyone other than the grantor, he's supposed to react a certain way. But we know police are not trained that way. Same thing with judges; they're not trained that way. But for example, again, what we were stating before is that a lot of people are looking for sovereignty, and they're looking for how to live free, if you want to call it. But they think that living life free is free, and they think it's simple. And I'll be honest with you, that's not true. It is more simple. It is much more simple for you to live as a subject within their society than it is for you to live autonomously.
Sure.
Because it requires more responsibility for you to know what you're doing and what you're talking about.
And there's other opportunities too. That's the crazy thing, and that's what a lot of people don't understand, that it is other ways of doing things instead of this standard convenience. Oh, I need to go this route to get my money from the bank. Boom, boom, boom.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Or use this credit card, debit card, whatever the case may be.
Indeed,
and that's the crazy
absolutely right.
thing.
We're a society built on convenience, and since that convenience has been so entailed and programmed into us, it is very tough to get out of it. It's very tough to get out of it.
When you got people lined up for a phone, day before, just stuff like that,
I mean, they're lined up for a week.
You know something wrong. You know something mentally, psychologically wrong with them.
It's interesting. The Boeing just had its first Dreamliner flight of its dream. I think it's called the Dreamliner.
Oh, straight up?
Yeah, they just had their first flight this past week, earlier this week. And these people were paying $16,000, $32,000, for a ticket. Some people pay $32,000 for a ticket just to be the first one to fly on this Dreamliner. Some people, I know there was a couple that they just, this is all they would do. They go around and fly, and they use their miles, a lot of their frequent flyer miles, and then of course they put up a lot of some funds for it. That's why it only cost them $16,000 for their 2 tickets. And it cost other people much more. But they just wanted to be the first ones. And, to each his own. That's what you want to do. Cool. But you have to realize that a lot of what that entails, and we're not talking about that specific instance, I'm just talking about the mentality there to go along with what you were saying, is that that's typically not someone that's autonomous or, sovereign.
It's the value, man. I mean, really, when it comes down to it's value, what we value.
Indeed. And it's like
that's probably the saddest thing in the world, I mean, when you think about it, because a lot of us value the wrong things. We value a 62-inch TV,
Indeed.
Instead of, getting free or starting a garden in the back or whatever,
Indeed.
It's crazy.
And the reason that we bring that up, a reason we even talk about that is because there's a lot of people out there that believe that filing a UCC-1 or filing an executive trustee letter or something to that nature is the resolution to your problems. And I'll tell you this, there is no silver bullet. We're not dealing with a werewolf here. There is no silver bullet. And even if you think there is a silver bullet, let's say we are dealing with a werewolf that's a beast, you have to cast and put together that bullet. You have to put the right amount of, you got to put the casing. You got to build a casing right around it. You got to put the bullet melt down.
You got to cast it.
Well, yeah. You got to all the details of casting it. With the gunpowder and everything. So when we say there's no silver bullet, we just mean that no one's going to hand you a silver bullet, and that's going to be the answer. There is no simple answer like that. You know what the simple answer is? It's knowledge. There's a reason that throughout all of the, and again, I'm not a Bible thumper, but throughout all of the scriptures, not just the Bible, but the Quran, the Sahuf, the Book of the Dead, and the Epic of Gilgamesh, and so on and so forth, Sumerian tablets, all of them talk about knowledge being the key.
Come on.
It is a consistent message. One of the consistent messages is that knowledge is the key. And knowledge requires your due diligence and your studying. It does.
That's it. Right.
All right. And so, so in essence, I guess I can retract that. There is a silver bullet, but that silver bullet requires you to put it together, and there's no store for you to go buy it at. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I'll give you an example about knowledge. Is, for example, out here in Washington, people pay property taxes on their houses, and I'm telling you, it's interesting because in Washington, they have what is called the Revised Codes of Washington, which is the statutory, or excuse me, the encoded statutory, the encoded rendition of law that's created by the legislation that is called statutes, that supposedly supported by their constitutional powers and powers relegated to them through the Enabling Act and so forth. Right.
Okay.
So, but one of the things that provides them the authority to do the things that they do with property taxes is RCW 84. If you look at RCW 84, it authorizes the legislator to charge or collect property taxes, from certain individuals or certain entities. But what the issue is that, and before I even go into that, let me bring this up. And this is another deception or a way that the government deceives people. We got a flyer that said that because the property values went down, have dropped, that the government has lost revenue, and therefore wants to raise taxes through the utilities. So they want to take utility taxes up from 1% up to 3%, right? Something to that nature. And so people are looking at it and say, hey, I feel them. They've lost revenue. But hold on. They were collecting more revenue than they were supposed to. They were unduly enriching themselves. And let me tell you why. Because according to RCW 84.04.075, it defines the term person, and according to RCW 84, all persons that own a property or own residential property, or own property in the state of Washington is required to pay a property tax. But guess what the word person means? According to RCW 84.04.075, persons means a corporation, a trustee, association, or other entity as such. Wait a minute. Which one of those said private individual? Which one of them? None of them. Not one of them. So there is no authority for any county or any state agency to collect property taxes against people. So wait a minute. Yeah. So why are they saying that we lost revenue because of the loss of value of the property? So now we want to tax everybody through utility taxes.
Pay the price, yeah. Pay the
price. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. You now trying to say, okay, well, we weren't authorized to do it before, but let's do it. Let's transfer that power over to something else and trick you into making it now so that we are authorized.
Yeah, and I wish people look at the little subtle things, like the term itself, persons. Ain't no such word. That's no such word in colloquial English.
Not in colloquial English today, no. The definition, this is one reason that English is some people call English a bastard language. You know, and it's interesting. I learned that people call English a bastard language when I started studying cultural anthropology, and we had to study the languages of various other cultures, and studying, you know, Aramaic or Spanish and things of that nature. You know, you learn that people actually consider, historians or those in the learned ones, if you want to call them, in linguistics, they realize that English is it's a very interesting, I'll just say that, it's a very interesting language. It's a very difficult language to pick up because of all of the, and every language has its dialects and things of that nature, but but English is very special in its sense that there's various forms of English. You have the cultural and subcultural. You have the national or ethnic, like you have England English. You have Irish English. You have Scotland English, and you have Southern English in the United States. You have Northeastern English, Northwestern, and so on and so forth. All these different dialects. Then you have even the subcultures of those dialects, you know, and slang and whatnot. But even in learning the basics, you know, it's tough because, you know, and they do this again in any language. When you study a language, you learn the formal aspect of the language. Well, then, you know, you come into, not only do you have to learn that I mean two different things, like I is me, but I is eyeball. You know what I mean? So wait a minute, you know, and there's other languages that have similarities, but in their languages as well. But I won't get into any further detail in that. But you know, another thing, and the reason that we're stuck on language right now is because a lot of people don't realize, and you and I talk about this all the time, the differences in the definitions of terms. You know, like I said, we said, there was a whole book written on just the definition of the word include. And then there's a phrase that is nascitur a associus. And what that means is that anything not it means that everything associated, or the word is defined by its associated words. So if I say person means individual, corporation, trustee, not trustee, trust, and I go on down the line with all business entities. Well, what does individual mean? A lot of people think that individual means, well, human, or and it doesn't. If it meant human, it would say human. It just says individual. Indeed. Well, there's an individual piece of grass. There's an individual corporation. There's an individualized corporation, such as that's called a soul. It's called a soul corp, or a soul. What is it called? Is it a soul corporation? SOLE.
Yes. So.
Sole proprietorship. There's also sole proprietorship. Yeah, well, there's something called a sole corporation as well, and it's where a singular individual can have a corp. Because with a C corp, you have to have 3 people. You have to have
C corp, S corp.
Yeah. With a C corp, you have to have a board. You got to have the president, the secretary, and so forth, right? So you got to have a president, secretary, at least. And with the limited liability company or a limited liability corporation, you actually have members.
Yes,
and you can have 1 member or you can have several members. Anyway, sole corporation is a different type of corporation. Now, I suggest people look that up. And I suspect that, and I would make the argument in court that, hey, according to the nature of the realm of nascitur a associus, is that if that term individual applies to sole corporations and not human beings, because if it did, that's what it would say.
Yeah, that even brings up a good point. That movie we was talking about the other day, you said you finally had watched Corporation.
Oh, yeah.
And that kind of segue and breaks down some of the dynamics of what was going on, how the corporation became a so-called individual, this person,
Right, and that's interesting, too, because with the 14th Amendment, people don't realize that after the 14th Amendment was ratified, the 14th Amendment was ratified or authorized, whatever you want to call it, if it was properly ratified or not, but to supposedly help former people that were formerly in bondage. People like to call them slaves, but I don't like to call them slaves because not all of them had that mentality. You have to, in order to be a slave, you have your mentality and your spirit has to be also in bondage. That means you have to have given up your freedom. But just because I'm in bondage, you know, and my mind is still free, I'm not a slave. I'm just someone that's in bondage, or I'm a prisoner, just held against my will. So, you know, but anyway, it was put forth to protect the rights of people that were freed at the time, or were released out of bondage. But what attorneys and what corporations did is they took attorneys and they took advantage of that and said, hey, we're defined as a person, so that means we have the rights and we're protected by the 14th Amendment as well, excuse me. And unfortunately, there's only been, I believe, 19. I know there's been less than 20 cases, from former people that were formerly in bondage that, took cases to the Supreme Court, or took cases to, Supreme Court. And there were over 200 corporations that used the 14th Amendment for rights and privileges, for their privileges. And what's interesting about that is that, again, going back to scriptures, and whether or not you're an atheist or other, the important things about these scriptures is not necessarily the itemized words that you see in the books. It's the message of the books. It's the message that is conveyed, right? And one of the things that it says, don't worship false gods. Well, people mistranslate that. They don't really realize that it's not really saying don't worship false gods. It's not merely just saying that. What it's saying is do not recognize don't honor false entities. The word God is translated. There is no word that translates to God, for one. If you look back,
creative. I mean, that's the key thing of the English language. They get real creative.
They really do, and they get really simplistic. Is the problem? Creative. You can get creative by being very simplistic. The word Elohim they try and translate to be God. Well, Elohim is a plural word, a word with plural indications. Adonai is also translated to be God. So is Yahweh, or the rendition of what people believe to be Yahweh or Yahuwah. And so on and so forth. I mean, there's Baal is translated to be Lord or God. El is also translated to be God, or El is actually translated to be God. It hasn't been translated. I haven't found it to be translated as Lord. But anyway, the point is that we get very simplistic, and all these different words we translate to one, and that is God. So my point is, and getting to this, is that was mistranslated. The term actually means deity. And when it says don't worship false, it means fictitious, something that does not exist, something that is untrue. Well, look at the definition of fictitious or false. Fiction, something that is not true. You know what I mean? So let's ask this question. Does McDonald's actually exist? No, McDonald's does not exist. It is not. You think it's that building. I asked my son, does McDonald's exist? And he says, well, the building's right there. I said, well, what if they take that building down and they change it into something else? The same building there, different sign. Does McDonald's? He says, huh. And my 6-year-old son said, well, no, then it doesn't. Well, I said, well, so why do people say that it does? He says, because they make hamburgers. And I said, well, again, it's about people's agreement that it exists. So we have agreed that a false entity exists. And that's exactly repugnant to what the rendition of the scripture, or the message that is being conveyed by these scriptures. And again, if you're atheist or not, I don't care, Christian, Muslim, whatever, the moment you start recognizing something that's not there, you're insane, because that means you're hallucinating. You know what I'm saying? And see, this is, and people may think we're being funny, but let's take a look at this. When they did if you look at several other cases that went through the Supreme Court initially, or not just the Supreme Court initially, the government initially looked at corporations as a group of individuals with a similar goal, working towards attaining the same goal. And that's was the definition of a corporation. That was legitimate. It was a group of people that have one goal, that are moving to accomplish that in harmony. That's what they do. But when you change that and you say, well, no longer is the corporation the group. A corporation is an entity that has rights within itself. Well, wait a minute. Now we're starting to recognize things that actually don't exist. And we're giving things rights in comparison to an actual physical being, which is us, sentient beings, to something that doesn't exist. And as a matter of fact, if you do if let's say if you acknowledge that it does exist, or you want to be the ones that say, you know what, I'm not doing that. I don't care what he says. McDonald's is good. They make some great hamburgers. Well, one thing, you're crazy if you think they make great hamburgers. But the other thing is that it's really very simple. Is that if you look at the characteristics of a corporation, and you look at the characteristics of people, and you plot, lay out on paper the characteristics, the behavioral characteristics of a corporation, you'll see that they would be an insane person with schizophrenia or, other mental disorders. And the reason being is because they're very callous about the things that they do. Right? They perform. For example, what's the bottom line goal for a corporation? The bottom line intention for a corporation is profits. And that's what they care about most, especially a public corporation. They have to answer first to their shareholders. So the bottom line is that they have to go after profits. They don't care that it harms the ozone layer, or that it harms the environment, or that it's slowly killing you. And they like Walmart. The fact, and they love the fact. Let's look at pharmaceuticals, for example. Every medicine in Western society has a side effect. Now, some of those side effects are worse than the actual symptom that they are treating. But what does that mean to the corporation? The corporation loves that. You know why? Because they not only get to create a medicine for the sniffles so you can stop your cold, but it's also going to give you a headache. So now they can create another headache medicine. That's going to create nausea. So now they get to create another nauseous medicine. You know what I'm saying? So the other one, this one's going to make you woozy. So okay, keep you off balance. So okay, we got to get one so that you can maintain your cerebellum, or your area of balance and so forth. You know what I mean? So you have to look at what these people, because that's all it is people that are doing this. It's not corporations. Corporations don't exist. It's people that are doing this, and they're hiding behind a shield. And they say that money is the root of all evil. Believe it or not, well, let's look at what's going on in the world. You have more, since these.
That's the God. That's the God right there. That
well, look at what it's making us do. We're going over invading other countries and saying that it's in the ideal of freeing them, and Saddam murdered all these people. Well, you know what? We went over there. When I say we, excuse me, but we sent soldiers over there to kill millions. And regardless of whether we did it with our own hands, or it was done with bombs, or it was done with civil strife within, we allowed that. And to be honest with you, that is on our hands. And I say we because we funded it. When you pay an income tax to the federal government and you fund the military-industrial complex, you're paying for their endeavors. And so your hands are just as dirty as anybody else's. And I'm not here to point fingers and say, hey, this is the problem. You guys.
No, that's real.
I'm just saying this is a reality that we have to look at.
And there's plenty of realities we got to look at. Like I said, we in this matrix where we thinking this stuff is real. That's what's going on. We think it's real, and it's not real. We just presuming or assuming, as that police officer would think.
And we brought it. We can. That's actually a perfect segue into something that we said earlier about income tax. Income taxes do. I'm not going to say that you should or shouldn't pay income tax. I'm going to say, look, there are certain taxes that are legitimate, and there are certain taxes that are not. But I'm going to tell you this: when you pay an income tax, at least from your W-2 or your W-4 from working at a job or as an employee, you're actually an employee of the entire governmental system. They see you as an employee.
Federal entity.
Yeah, you are. Even though you work for Microsoft or any other business that was created at the Secretary of State, down at the Secretary of State's office, you're actually an employee of, a low-level employee of the federal jurisdiction, and you fund their endeavors. Period. A lot of people don't want to believe that. They say, "Oh no." Look. Let me tell you something basic. And you and I know this. We've talked about this before, but we talk about all the time how you have the right to make a living as you please. And if you decide to go get a job, then you can do that. But if you decide not to get a job, who is anybody to tell you that you can't make a living for you to put food into your mouth? And then who is anybody to qualify you to say that, okay, you know what? If you want to write papers for people or you want to go cut people's yards, you got to first go down to the Secretary of State and pay this amount of money, fiat money, to or non-money if you want to call it, and get this paperwork first, so that we can track how much you make in order for you to make this money. Otherwise, you don't have a right to do it.
Come on. What kind of game is that? I mean, people think about that one.
So in other words, if you decide to not do what they tell you to do, you're committing a crime by not doing it. And because I had a friend, actually, the reason I'm bringing this up, I had a friend that he was working he was selling hair care products to folks. And if you're out there listening, please, to folks. And then he got called in, basically got a letter from the state saying, hey, in order to do that, you need to have you need to be incorporated because you got taxes that you need to pay. And I'm not going to get into all the details on it, but who is anybody to tell him that he can't feed his family?
Come on, brother.
Who is anybody to tell him that he cannot feed his family? But yet we fall into that all day. And then when you actually do create a business, what do you get into?
Commerce.
You get into commerce. Well, people are like, well, what does that mean, though? What does that mean when they get into commerce? They don't realize that a trade or business is what?
Commerce, yeah.
No, trade or business is a public office.
Yes,
remember?
yes.
A trade or business, when you get into trade or a business, and most people don't realize, when you get involved in a trade or business, you're actually in a public office. Ronald Reagan is reported as saying that all taxpayers are civil servants that don't have to take the civil servant exam.
Yeah, you're right. Per quote from him, Ronald Reagan.
Yeah,
now they got his son over there being a journalist. What is he, a journalist or something?
You talking about Mike Reagan?
I said, boy, this is guys trip. They everywhere.
Indeed. But you know what? That's another thing about the media. I mean, if you trust the media, I feel for you.
Oh, you got problems. You seriously got problems.
The media is the great Leviathan, man. I wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like this occupation. These occupations throughout the country. What's going on? These occupants or whatever you want to call them. These so-called protesters. It's a sad thing where they're not even really. You taking somewhat an action, but who gave you this idea of marching, sitting out there all day long, even though you still utilizing their service?
Well, and that's the key thing. You make a great point right there, is because if you want to march, first of all, or if you want to protest something, or you want something, you don't like something, you don't want to give energy to it. Well, when you protest, you actually give energy to it. It's like fear. Fear is a disease that people live in, or that when people get it, it eats away their soul from the inside out, spirit, whatever you want to call it. And the thing is that people don't realize is that when you protest, you're actually bringing energy to something. That's why the bankers or the Wall Street traders were up top drinking glasses of wine or champagne while they were down there, protesting, stop the Fed, or whatever the case is. And that's another thing is that we allow our movements to get hijacked.
Yes, indeed.
There's a saying. What is that saying that they put out? We will lead every revolution against us.
Come on.
And we don't even realize that we're getting hijacked, and that includes this so-called sovereign movement. I have a question. I'm not gonna. In here, we're not gonna call anybody out just because we want to be. I'm not saying that I want to discuss, and I'm not saying that I'm afraid of anybody, because I'm not. I don't live in fear at all. If you want to step to me, and when I say this, everyone's going to know who it is. But if you're selling a process, let's say you're selling a promissory note for a process to make a promissory note, and you're selling it for, $500, $600, $700. But this process is supposed to be able to, in using this process, you're supposed to create any unlimited amounts of funds. Why would I charge you $700, $800 to do it?
Come on.
I mean, if I know how to do it, and if it's true indeed, that means I have all the all the banking funds I need, or the funds I need in my bank account.
Yes.
I mean, I'm creating $1 billion promissory note right there, and I'm put this in the bank. I'm
giving this to you for free. This information.
Why wouldn't I do that? You know what I mean? Or charge $1. Okay, you know what? I want to make sure that at least you go work for it. You know, because I don't want to waste my whatever reason. I can't really figure out a reason that if you get $1 billion in your bank account where you got to charge somebody $700-800, and I can't believe that people would even be. You know what though? You can't fault him. What you have to do is look at the people that are actually buying it.
Yeah, buying into the.
Are you serious?
I mean, it's the same issue with the. We won't go there, but you know what I'm talking about as far as on the issue about the housing issue. I mean, foreclosures.
Well,
whatnot,
let's go there. Let's go there. Let's go because we're talking about autonomy here, right?
Yes,
we're talking
indeed.
about, ones who were sovereign. And I'll put it this way. Let me just say it plainly, is that every bank that has been issued a promissory note and securitized that promissory note and has a server send you letters or any type of statement saying that you owe a mortgage whatsoever, or that you defaulted or anything, is committing a criminal act. Period. There's no question about it. If let's put it in simplistic forms, okay, simplistic form. And I'm going to use. To some of you, this won't apply, but if you live in a non-judicial state, and a non-judicial state means they're dealing with a deed of trust, right? Which means they can just take you to, they can foreclose on you without taking you to court, but they do have to take you to court to get you kicked out, because they convert you to a tenant as opposed to an owner.
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
So they take this deed of trust and they put the promissory note inside the deed of trust, or they attach it to the deed of trust. So now let's look at something tangible, and let's picture a deed of trust as a bucket. And so that's a trust. A trust is a bucket that holds something, and there's a trustee of that bucket or that trust, and it's supposed to do whatever the terms of that indenture are. But it can only do it if the property that is affecting the beneficiary is attached, whether it's money, whether it's the property or the deed of trust, or excuse me, I'm sorry, the promissory note, right? Mm-hmm. So now let's imagine another bucket over here. And we take that promissory note out of that bucket or out of that deed of trust, and we put it into another one, and we call that an asset-backed pool trust. And what an asset-backed pool trust is when a bank takes a group of promissory notes and they say, okay, well, we got 5, we got to get 5 more, and they put 5 more in it. And once they reach a certain level, they say, okay, we're going to sell this trust pool right here, or this pool of promissory notes, this group of promissory notes, as a trust on Wall Street. What they do is they decide to get a bunch of investors to put funds into it. So let's say there's 10 promissory notes that add up to $10 million. Okay? So one investor gives out $1 million, another investor gives out $500,000, so on and so forth, until they reach $10 million. The bank that put the promissory note in gets that $10 million because that's what they bought into. Now, of course, we're not going to get into all the detailed fees of commodity or the traders. We're not going to get into all that. But let's just keep it simplistic. The bank has now received compensation for that promissory note.
Indeed. Already.
So now let me ask you a question, and let's put a pin in that and keep it right there. Let's say I owe Comcast, the cable company. Let's say I owe them $500. And someone else decides to be really, really nice, and they decide, for whatever reason, and they go give Comcast $500. Can Comcast now come after me and say, hey, you owe me $500?
No.
No, because someone has already paid it voluntarily, paid it and attributed to that account. So in order for Comcast to come after me, they would be unduly enriching themselves. In other words, they'd be getting paid twice off of one transaction.
And that's what's going down.
Is
that's
that
literally
legal?
What's going down.
Is that legal? And did you disclose? Did they disclose to you that they were going to do that?
Nope.
No. That's a TILA violation. Full disclosure, baby. What is it? Is it Title 28 or is it Title 18? I think it's 28-1341, right? Is that mail fraud?
It's Title 18.
Title 18, United States Code 1341. Forgive me, I get titles and stuff mixed up. I read so many.
Yeah, but at least the whole point, we know Title 18 is criminal code.
Right. Well, there are also other ones, but anyway, you're right, because that's the judiciary form of the criminal code, right? And so 1341 is mail fraud. Well, if I send you, let's say you bought a car, right? Let's say you got a old school. Let's say you got a El Camino, or El Dorado. Let's say you got an El Dog. I like El Dogs, right? And let's say it's a 95 El Dorado, and you've paid it off for 5 years, and then I send you something in the mail saying, look, man, you owe me $5,000 because I bought this, blah, 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 you bought your note, and you say, well, wait a minute, man, I paid this off a while ago. And they're trying to get you to, they consistently trying to get you to make a payment. And let's say I do send the payment, say, okay, man, I don't want you guys to come get my car. But then I find out that, hey, wait, I find my records and say, wait a minute, I paid this off. I sent you $5,000. You owe me that money back.
No doubt.
If I take that to court and I show, hey, I've already paid this off, or this was already paid off by this process right here, such and such date, they just sold this, I can sue them and get that money back. Now, can I also go to the police and file a criminal complaint against them for mail fraud? Because they sent something into the mail, through the mail, to me saying that I owed something that they knew I did not owe them.
Come on.
Yeah, I can contact the police for that.
And tear them up.
Yeah.
Big butt.
With the banks, you want to contact the FBI because, they're national associations. They're members of the National Association, which means, and they were provided their properties, or their authority by Congress, which means they're also instrumentalities of Congress. So now you can deal with them in state court as well, but you do want to recognize what a bank is. They are instrumentalities of Congress. Period. The reason that power was given by us by the people to the government to be able to deal with money, to be able to produce or make money, right? Well, they granted that power over to someone else, the Federal Reserve. Now that's going to hurt us in the long run. The reason being is because it's an idiotic system. It really is, and that's what people are upset about. And if not, that's what people should be upset about. That's what Wall Street, the so-called Occupy Wall Street. I don't like that title, but so-called Occupy Wall Street.
They phrase it, and they phrase that too. I mean, the government had something.
Well,
we know.
Well, no. If you look at the speeches that are coming, or the words that are coming from the people that are so-called the occupiers of Wall Street, when they're not dealing with the police brutality aspect of it and trying to maintain their presence there.
Peace.
What they're saying is, like, look, in the Fed, let's get rid of this Fed-based system and put the power back give the power back to government, in the hands of government, to create and deal with money, create and regulate money. Which is, to be honest, I don't know why any nation wouldn't do that.
I got you.
What type of idiocy is it that a nation is sovereign, has its own power, has its own basically absolute power within the borders of its domain, but yet wants to hand off one of the most powerful tools
Weapons,
that exists by the creation of money, and you're going to give it over to somebody else? That's one of the most powerful tools you can have in order to maintain your freedom.
Yeah.
Well,
they don't see. That's the whole point of being disconnected. We're disconnected as a people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I
right.
mean, that's the first lesson. Know thyself.
Indeed.
We knowing Kardashian. We're knowing all these basketball team players, and we can tell you everything about them too. Yeah. That's the crazy thing. But then you ask them about themselves, and they don't even know what their weakness is. They don't even know what their strengths are.
And
that's the crazy thing.
And that's sad because these government entities, and I'm not a conspiracist. This is reality. And you can actually find them. If you go to their sites, they'll tell you, they'll show you the various government sites. They have, they get together with committees to determine who they're dealing with. With this sovereign citizen movement, if you think you're moving in anonymity with them, you're a fool. They are keeping profiles on who claims to be this, who claims to be that, and how to deal with them. They did this with the flag, the people that had an issue with the fringes on the flag. And that's interesting. I actually did read in Title I, United States Code, about how the flag is supposed to look, but it doesn't say anything about fringes at all in there. At least I couldn't find it. If somebody can point it out to me. And there was an attorney who's teaching individuals classes who also ascribed to that.
Speaking on that.
Yeah, speaking on fringes and whatnot, that aspect of it. But I still couldn't find, and he did, he pointed out something in the United States Code, and I looked at it, and I still didn't see anything about fringes. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to concern myself with
it's
that.
A lot of manufacturing.
There's a lot of disinformation and misinformation, and misinformation is a mistake. Somebody passing along something that is just they're regurgitating something that was incorrect and they're passing it along to somebody else. That's misinformation. It's a mistake. They didn't intentionally deceive you, but somebody deceived them, they believed it, and they're passing it along to you. Now, disinformation is deceit. They're intentionally deceiving you. They're set out there to misguide you, and that's where the divide and conquer, or we shall lead every revolution against us. This is why they control the media. And if you don't think they control the media, all you have to do is look at I forget the name of the court case, the title of the court case, where Fox sued 2 of its own employees. It fired them, actually. I'm sorry, it didn't Fox them. It didn't sue them. What they did is they fired 2 employees, and those employees sued them for wrongful termination. But in that court case, the court said that Fox's lawyer said that, look, we don't have to report what you think is the news. We can make what we think is the news. And there was actually several managers from Fox that actually had regurgitated that first. So that's where he got that from. It's not like he was making it up. So I'm not going to blame it on that attorney. But he went and made those arguments, and they ended up winning. That, in other words, what it's saying is that Fox can determine its own news that it wants to report, whether it's true or not. In other words, they can legally lie to you, and they do. They lie to you. And if you don't believe that, I got a bridge to sell you. I really do. I got a bridge right down the street. I want to sell it to you. You know what I mean? So holler at me. I make life easy. But the main thing, like we said, I think people don't recognize, and I think it's another mistake that people do, is then when they rely upon the Constitution, I don't rely.
That's a big one.
It's a tough one too. Now, the one thing that you do have to realize is that the Constitution, first of all, doesn't give us any rights. We know that. It doesn't give us anything. So you're telling me I didn't have rights before 1776, or no one had rights before 1776, and the Constitution was done after that. But you get my point. For you historians, we know that the Constitution wasn't signed in 1776. Okay, so we'll get past that. But the point is that the Constitution doesn't give you rights. It tells the government that they have to recognize those rights. That's what it tells them. And we had to do that because it's government that we pool our money to, so they become a very powerful entity with a large amount of people, individuals sending money, $10 here, $10 there, by 360-something million people, even though a lot of those are babies and whatnot. But, let's say 200,000 adults or 150,000 adults, 150 million, adults. If 150 million adults send, $10, then you amass quite a bit of money, just from each individual sending you a small amount. Now, we know we pay much more than that. You know what I'm saying? So they become a very powerful entity, which means there's the potential for a power grab. Well, the Constitution is there, put in place, so that they will not be able to grab power beyond the already provided but means to do so. And it's not really that they can grab power, but they are put forth in order to protect our rights. And part of our rights is life. So if somebody attacks us, then hey, we got to respond back because we want to live.
Exactly.
Right? We want to protect our lives and our property. So hey, we get together as a people, and we had the perfect system for war previously. And that was that if you supported the war, you bought bonds. If you did not support the war, you don't buy the bonds. That means that people don't want to go to war. Leave us alone. But now they don't do that anymore. Now the president declares that they want to do something, and Congress says, okay, we approve it. But see, the thing about people don't recognize is that those are still illegal. The reason that they're still illegal is because they're still committing acts of war. They're going in destroying people. They're going in destroying towns. Now, technically, they're only supposed to be going into the capitals. But we know that they're going in more than the capitals with the current way of their...
Yeah, and they're killing innocent people, literally.
Oh, my goodness.
Children and kids, mothers.
There was a report on the news this morning where there's actually war crimes that have been committed. And there's a few soldiers on trial now. I think it's a staff sergeant that's on... He's the main focus. He wasn't the only one. But what he was doing, he was going in killing civilians, and then after they were dead, he would stage it so that they looked like they were fighting back.
doing something.
Yeah. And now so some of his and so he got other people within his platoon to side with him to back him up. Well, now they're telling on him because they've been caught. And
snitching.
Oh yeah, well, hey, snitching ain't always wrong.
I know.
You know, if somebody's going up on, if you got an HK or an H10 or M16 or whatever it is that they're carrying these days, or M60 or versions of them, I know they got the new weapons now from since I was there, but and you're killing unarmed civilians, then I want a snitch because that means justice is going to be served because they need to be tried. I don't care what side you're on. You do some shit like that, you need to be tried. And you know what? Forget wasting taxpayers' money and holding them up. Let's put them to death because they don't deserve. I mean, you know what? I'm not here to tell somebody that they deserve to live or deserve to die. But if you take other people's lives unjustly, okay, you need to reset, start over. There's no reason for us to sit here and hold you because
then you got the nerve to kill Troy Davis and all these other cats.
Yeah, now and see that's the other side. That is the flip side of that coin. There's always a flip side, and so you're right. You're bringing that up because. But it's not, it's not just Troy Davis. If you go back and you look at history, the youngest person ever to be put to death by the United States, and I think it was done in Texas, the youngest person to be put to death in the United States was a 14-year-old boy, and they found out afterwards that he did not commit the crime that they said he did.
Let's go, man.
As a matter of fact, he was trying to help them with the crime, and what he did, he was a young, unfortunately, he was a young 14-year-old black boy. So-called black boy, because there's no such person as black, but hey, that's a status thing. But anyway, the young black boy, and this was happening in the 1940s. You can look it up. I don't remember his name, but I know he was put to death, I believe, in 1944. But he was, two white girls came up missing, and he was in the party to help search for them. Well, he had mentioned to someone that he had seen them earlier in that day.
Okay.
And so they took that as that he was the last one to see him and he had to have done something to him. They took that boy and they murdered him. Now, they took him to trial, supposedly took him through trial. Now, of course, all of his so-called peers, the jury, were Europeans.
Right.
Yeah. And, and I don't want to get into the thing where I'm blaming all white folks. So but there is a climate, there is a climate that is created, an atmosphere and climate that is created here. So let's not also relieve them of their responsibilities as well. But I don't want to put the whole thing because a lot of it is on us.
Yes,
but we'll get that. We'll get to that. But they took this boy and they had to put him on top of books just so that he could get the electrodes put on him, on his head and so forth, and electrocuted this boy. And then come to find out that they were wrong. Now, if that's not something amazing for you, I don't have a problem with the death penalty when it's applied justly. But when it's applied to people that that have not done anything whatsoever to be put there, I have a problem with that. I have a serious problem with that.
That's a big issue.
Yeah, it's murder. It's saying you can't change it from being murdered just because the government, a group of people, does it. Because there is no such thing as government. It's a group of people.
Yeah, people, individuals.
Yeah. So just because a group of people get together and pull this trigger doesn't mean it's not murder. And now that the blood on his hands comes down to everyone, not just the one who pulled the switch, but everyone who supported them and paid them, even continued on afterwards. Because then you're supporting a murderer.
Man.
So yeah, you're right. But the thing is, we're not here to complain. We're here to say, hey, there are solutions, and the solution is for you to study.
Yes.
It really is.
Yeah.
We talked about
it's your knowledge. I mean, it's right here. That's the crazy thing as far as information. The information is there.
Yeah.
When you're talking like the Library of Alexandria, as the guy would refer to. It's right here in the palms of our hands, But don't take me wrong. You got to take some and you got to leave some.
Yeah, indeed, you do, and you have to be able to decipher which is real, what's real and what's not, and that requires some discipline, some mental and spiritual discipline.
And get out that TV.
Well, and that's true. That is, and see, here's the thing with that is that, I watch football on Sundays. I got a couple teams that I follow, but you know what? That's on a Sunday, but I have at certain times. And I have certain times that I'm sitting there reading and I'm studying. I have certain times that I'm teaching my children. There's a time for everything. If you want to be amused, then fine. But learn what amusement is. And when you put amusement into 70 or 80 or even 90% of your time, make that 90% of your time, then you have to, again, realize that that's the effect, that's the resonance that you're going to create within yourself. And a lot of people don't comprehend when we talk about resonance and things of that nature, but that has has everything to do with sovereignty and autonomy. We'll get into that in a second. But so what I'm saying is,
obviously, some of these conversations are going to get more into some of the detailed views of what you look at, especially when you're talking getting off the grid and some elements on that level and getting back to a peaceful, getting your peace of mind back.
Oh, yeah, and see, that's you're absolutely right. The first thing first is that if you want to be free, it starts in your mind. There's no marching for freedom. Just because somebody puts me in jail doesn't mean that I'm not free. I'm free when I accept being there and say, okay, this is where my place is. This is where I deserve. That's when I become a slave. That's when I become a servant. But otherwise, I'm just I'm a prisoner. You can call me a prisoner of war, a political prisoner, a racial gender prisoner, racial gender, or prisoner, whatever you want to call yourself. You're a prisoner if you're put in jail or your freedom is taken away, but your mentality or your spirit to be free is there. One thing that I know, the reason where I know why I am the way I am right now. I know why I am here in this movement discussing with you in the hopes of influencing people to recognize their own autonomy, which is synonymous with liberty, is that, look, you were born with free will. You decided to give it up or not give it up. Even with your parents, that influenced your behavior by discipline or reward, you decided to do a certain thing a certain way. You may have decided, well, I don't want to be on timeout, so I'm going to do this. Or I didn't want a whipping, so I'm going to do this. Or I'm not going to let them catch me. Or, I want some ice cream, so I'm going to do this, clean my room up and blah. They only influenced your behavior, but you decided to make the move and whatever it is that you did, right? And that's what true freedom is. And I've always had, man, and even growing up, I grew up in the South. And we were always at church, until we moved. And then even when I moved up north, I got a girlfriend, and we always, went to church. But I was always questioning what the preacher was saying.
24/7.
I was always questioning, if that's the case, then, well, you want me to worship the Son? How come I can't worship just the Father? Wasn't the Son a man? And some people are going to look at that like, oh, you're young, you didn't know any better, blah, blah, blah. Look.
Yeah, whatever.
Ask questions. The moment you stop asking questions and you just start accepting somebody else's rendition of what truth is, the moment that you become a zombie.
And that's right there.
Yep.
That's beautiful. And we're talking how many of us are literally zombies anyway. Just go with the flow, brother. Don't even ask no question. Just, sure, where do I go sign up?
Yeah. I mean, they told us we needed driver's licenses, so we went and did it. They give us a parking ticket, so we go and pay it. But they don't realize that you have the right to be on that road because you created it. It's yours. You don't realize that you don't have to pay a parking ticket because that instrument is a violation of due process, because on the instrument it says you have been deemed to be found guilty of this infraction. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. First of all, if you want me to come to court, you need to issue me a summons and complaint in accordance with civil, whatever the state or federal civil procedures are. It says, if you look at, I don't care if you're in California, Washington, I don't care what state you're in, it says that in order to initiate a civil complaint or a complaint, you have to issue you start out with a summons and complaint. Even with a crime, there has to be a complaint. Someone has to have committed a crime, and someone has to have become a victim. Corpus delicti. I mean, there has to be a victim. So wait a minute. So I was charged with not providing information to police one time, and I was like, well, what makes you think that I have to? Because I asked you for it. Well, hold on. Let me ask you something. Where is your authorization? Your what's it called? The designation of authority, which is essentially their oath of office.
Okay.
The oath of office determines what their power is and what they're able to do. It determines who they are first, and then the oath, which is taken to the Constitution, state and federal, determines what they can do. But again, remember earlier we mentioned the enabling acts, enabling acts of each state, and the enabling act tells you that, look, the only form of government that can be created is a republican form. And the Constitution cannot be repugnant to the principles of the Declaration of Independence, as well as the United States Constitution. And I had an attorney tell me one time when I was young in this getting in this, I had decided that I wanted to go after this police officer for, basically harassing me for, get a ticket. And she said, well, you do have to have one. And I was like, well, wait a minute. What about the Declaration of Independence? We went over a lot of things. And one of the things was the Declaration. She said, well, the Declaration of Independence really is not a legally enforceable document. I said, whoa, time out. I said, doesn't the Enabling Act say that the principles that the Constitution and the government for Washington cannot be repugnant to the principles of the Declaration of Independence as well as the United States government? So doesn't that make it a legally enforceable document? And she says, well, you seem to know more than what I do, so why don't you go ahead and move forward with it? And I'm like, well, wait a minute, I'm sitting here consulting with you.
I'm asking you.
So if you don't know, then fine, okay, I recognize that. I'm not here to debate with you, but I'm here for you to take all of this in accord so that you can inform me or either confirm with me how I should move forward.
No doubt.
Again, I was young and didn't know any better. I didn't know anything about corpus juris secundum at the time, about anytime you hire an attorney that you're a ward of the state or an infant or incompetent and blah, blah, blah. I'll never do that again. And FYI, people, look up the word counselor. It is not synonymous with attorney. Attorney is only one type of counselor. It is not the only form of counselor. So you are not required to have an attorney. You are required, I shouldn't say you are required. You have the right to have someone with you that is learned in law as a counselor. And they don't even have to be learned in law if you want them. If you just want them to sit there for you for support, then they can do that. That's your counsel. The Constitution doesn't define counselor, and it doesn't define, and even the Beauvier, the books that define the terms of the Constitution, do not define it as an attorney, which means a bar, a member of the bar, which, excuse me for getting loud, but which is a contradiction in the terms of their Constitution as well. Because let's think about this. When someone passes the bar, which means they take a test that was put forth by the Bar Association, by whatever state that you're in, and then they sign, they become a member of that Bar Association. What they are, they become a judicial officer. Most people don't recognize that all state bar associations, all of them, look them up, are administrative arms of the Supreme Court of that state. So, for example, here in Washington, the Washington Bar Association is the administrative arm, an administrative arm of the Supreme Court of Washington. So when an attorney signs up under under that organization, they become a judicial officer. This is recognized. But what you don't recognize is the violation of the separation of powers. When they take on an executive role. So, for example, what office or what branch does the district attorney sit in? What branch does the autonomy? Yeah. No. The district attorney sits under the executive. He's underneath the mayor. He works with the police, which is the executive. But he's a member of the court, which is a judicial officer.
Judicial officer.
Oh yeah. That's a violation of the principles of the Constitution that discuss or that
roles the
balance, or excuse me, the separation of powers.
Checks and balances.
Checks and balances, exactly. Checks and balances, right, exactly, is what it's called. And so we have to look at little things like that and recognize there's a lot of things that they're... See, again, it's that, we talked about this before, we always talk about that frog, the frog, boiling frog, right? If you attempt to throw a frog in a pot of boiling water, what's he going to do? He's going to hop out. I ain't getting in there, that's hot.
Hey.
But if you put him in some cold water or some, cool water that's comfortable to him, he'll sit there and chill. And then you turn that flame on high, he'll sit there and boil to death. He'll sit, and that's what's going on.
And that's how most of us is thinking, exactly what's going on.
And you remember, we talked before about in 1933 what happened with Roosevelt.
Oh,
he ordered people to give up their gold, right?
Give up their gold, period.
Well, let me ask you this: what branch is he in? He's the executive branch because he was the president, right? Well, can the president tell the people, the sovereign, if you want to be sovereign now, remember the sovereign is the highest lawmaker. And at the time, they actually were, there were distinctions. You could tell, you knew who the sovereign was. It's not like now, like the lines are blurred and the sovereigns are, kind of incognito. Then the sovereigns were, the European male. That was it. And as soon as he put out this order, this executive order, saying that people couldn't, persons had to hand in, and it said persons
Mm-hmm.
had to hand in their gold, couldn't hoard their gold. All these people came flocking, and that was a test, and people didn't even recognize it. And there's some people out there to this day that say that that was a legitimate, order or law that you have to follow. You had to follow that, or you
Executive.
couldn't.
Yeah, matter of fact, I heard he was claiming it was a law. Michael Reynolds from Earthship about the land, one of these laws they came out with, and it was like an executive order, and he was claiming that was law. I was like, man, we are lost.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed.
We are lost as a people because we don't really dig into nothing. We just take it as surface,
Right.
And that brings us to that same issue when the 33 with George Orwell, and I always use this example when George Orwell did that broadcast about the aliens.
Yeah, the world of worlds.
And he literally manipulated the people to flip out. People was really going cuckoo. And that was the time really where they really seen what we can do. And then you had during that period of time as well as the Wizard of Oz, all these certain things was going on in the 30s. People don't really connect.
Right.
You had, when you really talking the 30s was straight hella issues. A lot of issues. The Social Security Administration Act. And, all kinds of stuff was invented.
People talk about the the bankruptcy, and some people say, well, the bankruptcy wasn't true, or some people say it is true. You know what? I don't care whether it was or not. I know that even if that wasn't true, it is going to be true eventually, because you cannot have a debt-based system where the only time that money comes into creation is through debt and expect all of that debt to be paid back. It is an impossible contract. It is an impossible contract to have a debt-based system. You mean to tell me in order to put any dollar into circulation that I have to pay 5 cents on that dollar? Well, where am I supposed to get the 5 cents if you're the only one that's authorized to create the money? So you got to create the money for the interest in order for me to pay that interest, which is going to create more interest. Wait a minute, that don't sound right. We going in circles? Ain't this the same place we've been before? And we're not paying attention to that stuff.
And then we want to give it, and that's the problem, because we give them the power. We literally give the so-called government the power to do what everything. I mean, because look what we do. We ask them for, what should I feed my child? Similac? What should I feed?
And nature already told you, feed that boy the breast milk. We don't grab onto that nibble. Don't be scared. It's gonna be all right. That's nature. That's what it's for. You got to think about it though. We're the only animal that does that. And we're also the only animal that on a regular basis drinks another animal's bodily fluids.
Exactly.
Milk.
And got a nerve to be wondering why why we got all this obesity, why we got all these other issues that's dealing with, even our animals are reflecting of our views, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I was at the park the other day with my little dog, and man, I saw these big old. I mean, one was a Saint Bernard, and I think the other one was an Akita. But they were so big, man. They looked like bear cubs. I mean, they were dealing. They were walking with an elderly couple. So I assume that they don't get out and exercise much, just because you can tell when somebody exercises.
Yeah, you definitely can tell.
And so obviously the dogs didn't either, because them dogs was fat, bro. They were fat. And it's unfortunate, because not only are we getting that way, but obviously the animals that rely upon us are now becoming, are having that same issue, because you're starting to see more cancerous types of issues with animals and that nature, as well as us. And we don't realize that we're being attacked, and I have to say this. We're being attacked in every form of fashion. We're being attacked spiritually. Unless you want to discuss that real quick, I'll tell you how. You have now churches that cannot become churches unless they file out paperwork properly and become a 503c organization. Mm-hmm. And anytime people say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, here's the thing: is that if you do not preach or teach within I said it right. If you don't preach within their certain under their guidelines, and you go beyond their guidelines, they will threaten to take that away from you, take your 503c away. Well, you're not a church, you're not acting as a church, so you're over here teaching mathematics and science, so you're acting more like a school. So we're going to take your 503c away instead of. Well, wait a minute, hold on. Mathematics and science is all a part of, and that's the problem. Is mathematics and science is a part of every aspect of our way of life, including religion, as we like to call it, even though I don't like to call it that. But we like to separate and compartmentalize things, as you say. And that's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Every time you get married, first of all, in order to get a license for anything, is saying that you are doing something that was at one time illegal or a crime, and you're getting permission in order to do it. So when was getting married ever a crime? Ever?
Man, come on, brother.
You know what I mean? If you don't believe me, ask your preacher what he says. Go to somebody's wedding. Just go. You see a wedding going on, go and listen to the vows or the vow that or the oath that the.
You can watch it on TV. All these celebrities get married in 5 days.
Yeah, the preacher says. He says, by the power invested in me and by the state of whatever. Wait a minute. I don't want a preacher that has the power invested in him by the state or something to get me together, because if I want to be married, if I'm going to be married, and it comes from I don't care whether you're an atheist or not, marriage comes from a religious institution. Now, partnership doesn't, but a marriage comes from a religious institution, or at least the aspect of a spiritual institution, I should say, a spiritual aspect of things. And it's a uniting of two people under vows, because who in their right mind would take a vow to someone that they've only known for a year or 6 months or a day or however much time for the rest? Why would you take a vow to them for the rest of your life? You have no idea who you're going to be in 10 years. You don't know how you're going to be in a year. And then what if you guys grow apart, but yet you taking a vow that I'm going to be with you the rest of my life through thick and thin? Well, that's not how they used to do it back in the day. And people say, well, yes, they did, but no. I'm telling you, in studying history,
do your homework.
Merely look at, I can point you to one civilization, but I'll point you to several. You can go to Rome. You can go to, Rome wasn't the one I was going to point out. You can also go to Greece. That was the one I wasn't going to point out, but I was going to point out the Kemet, or what people call Egypt. There's documented history that Egyptians or Kemetic peoples used to do 1 and 5 year agreements, and then decide if they wanted to continue on from there. And if they wanted to continue on from there, then they would decide to have children. And if they had children previously, then they would determine how they were going to deal with those children, and they maintained according to those records. Now, people like to say that Greece was the first one that came up with the modern form of our legal system. That's not true. And and the reason that I say that is because in Kemet, or Egypt as people like to call it these days, but anyway, in Kemet, they used to have what is called public hearings, court hearings. And though it wasn't necessarily by a jury in all cases, or of the people, so to say, it was still by a judge who had to open it up so that people could make sure that he was being fair. And if he was not being fair, then the people would not acknowledge his judgment as true and formed. They would be void, because they would accept it or not accept it. And if they basically were in that same situation and they were like, oh, that's not fair, I wouldn't like that done to me or my family, then they wouldn't do it to someone else. And the judge's order was void. That's the first, at least recorded, that I know, the first recorded form of public or jury type of hearings. You know what I mean? Now, they also happen in Sumer, but some of that is it's not really clear in certain aspects on how they did certain things with me. I've read a lot of their societal, cultural, as far as spiritual is concerned, but not as far as their legal system. So I haven't been entailed in here, so I'll admit that. But anyway,
that's all understanding. But you already referencing right.
What was that code? What was the specific code that talked about trade and business? Do you remember that? Was it 26 or 28 USC 77?
I think it was it 26?
I think it was 26 USC.
26, 77, 01, something.
Just read. It's an A or B. It was one of them. But anyway, it talks about, and it defines what a trade or business is. And it says that it's an operation of a public office. Hold on. So let's recognize this. Trade or business. Let's say you got a small business, and I had one called Royalty Properties, right? And it was when I was in real estate. So according to 26 USC 7701, I was operating in a public office. Wait a minute, I wasn't elected. I was never trying to run for government. I was never trying to work for government.
Okay.
But you're telling me that I'm a part of a public office? Hold on a minute. I didn't want to be part of a public office. So somebody tricked me because I didn't know any better. I allowed myself to be tricked because I didn't know any better. But when you know better, you got to do better, and each one should teach one. So I'm out here sharing this with, with everybody. And
that's how we do it.
You know,
I mean, we've been doing it for a while here in My Sovereign World.
I appreciate it.
And that's the whole key thing of growth. I mean, we all got to grow. That's why we give you what you need.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, in interpreting these laws, man, people have to look at things. I know, for example, one thing. I know there's this site. It used to be out there, and his name was Cody. If anybody knows him, he used to run. And he was real good. I used to like the way his perspective of things. But he used to have a site called The Natural Person, I think is what it was. And he was open-minded. He would leave his mind unlocked to different perspectives, but he had an idea of certain things. And he used to believe that the natural person meant the man and woman. And that's not necessarily true. Let's look at the word natural. The word natural just means, all it means is that used for what it was built for, or used for what it was created for. So, for example, if I want something that eats wood, I'm going to go get a carpenter ant. That's a natural person, right? Or something, a natural wood eater or something to that effect. It's natural because it is what it was made for. When McDonald's was created for making hamburgers, it didn't have to be the best hamburgers. It just had to be hamburgers. So if a corporation is considered a person, can McDonald's be considered a natural person? Well, according to Black's Law Dictionary, natural again means something used for what it was created for. So that means that McDonald's can be a natural person if we're talking about hamburgers. Again, we're recognizing, and we acknowledge that that law, right, that the legal perspective or statutes recognize fictitious entities and whatnot. So putting it in perspective, can McDonald's or can Microsoft? Let's use more people. Everybody's familiar with McDonald's, but Microsoft. So let's say we're talking about computer programming or internet or something to that nature. Well, Microsoft, in accordance with the internet or programming, Windows-based programming, is a natural person under legal terms. So just because it says natural person doesn't mean that that's what they are talking about, and you just have to be able to articulate that. Another thing that you can do. And this is just things to get you guys started, people started, or to further their studies and things of that nature. And then I want to get into that EFT thing just real quick about people being careful about that. Real quick, one of the things that you can do is if you look up under corporations, if you look up on what is it called, Brad and Dunn Street. Brad Dunn Street is a just like
corporation.
What's the name of the Experian or what's the TransUnion? They keep track of people's credit scores and things like that. Well, Brad Dunn Street keeps track of corporations and their credit scores. So if you go on Brad and Dunn Street and you pull up any name of any courthouse in America, in the United States, pull up any courthouse on the Brad and Dunn Street, and it'll come up trading as or doing business as. Well, hold on.
Indeed.
That's indicating that it's a corporation. So what you do is you contact the city clerk for whatever city that you're dealing with, and you ask them for the charter for the city. In the charter for the city, a couple of things that it'll reveal to you. It'll reveal to you what the police actually are, because the police, for example, we have a subdivision down here called Renton. And the city of Renton, the police department for the city of Renton is not the same thing as the sheriff. The sheriff is voted in by people, or actually corporate members, but the point is by people. The police are not. The police chief is not voted in. He's appointed by the mayor. The mayor is the head or the executive of that particular sub corporation, or the subsidiary of the state corporation, which is a subsidiary of the federal corporation, and so forth. But it's more likely called, or more entail called, a political subdivision. But the point is that it is a corporation. And all of them have charters, and all of them have tax ID numbers. Ask a police officer to see his identification. He will not show it to you. You know why he won't show it to you? Because if you flip it over and turn it over on the back, it has a tax ID number on it. Now, I'm pretty sure they're going to take those off. But do a Freedom of Information Act request and ask for his stub or the stub of any judge. And you'll see that they get a paycheck from a corporation with a tax identification number, and that tax identification number is on that pay stub.
Yeah, that's great.
So don't just tell me, you know, and it used to be that people tell me, well, you're going into a bank, or a judge is really a bankster because bench means bank, and that is true. But you can't just say that and then have substance
and
to it,
that's the
because
problem.
they're
That's
going to
what
like, okay,
we
well,
stop.
prove it. You know what? We don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to play dumb here. I don't know what you're talking about. We're going to continue moving forward. Well, you know what? What's up with this tax identification number right here? I want to know who you are because I don't have no contract with you.
Indeed.
And what does every constitution say? By the consent of the people, blah, 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 blah. By the consent of the people, blah, 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 blah. They'll tell you it's by your consent.
10th Amendment. I mean, look at the 10th Amendment. Tell you right there. The only jurisdiction is right there in District of Columbia. Nowhere else,
it's interesting.
Nothing.
Oh, that's another thing. You brought up something. People believe that they took away the redemption clause for money, for dollar bills or Federal Reserve notes. That's not true. They did take it off of the dollar so that the majority of people wouldn't know, but they always take things that help you out of plain sight and they make you go find it. Now, I don't remember which, honestly, I right now, off the top of my head, I do not recall which United States Code title it is under. But there's a United States Code. I read it. I do have it in my notes. If you want to specifically email me or contact me about it, I can send it over to you. But there's a United States Code that says that if you, if you object to using Federal Reserve notes, you can send those Federal Reserve notes into an office in Washington, D.C., and it gives you the address, and they will redeem them for you. So don't tell me that they took away the redemption or the availability to take redemption.
It's not common knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. It's not common. They hid it, so people don't know where it is, and it's not in plain sight. It doesn't.
And they're
exist.
good at that. You know, they're good at that. They've been doing that for a long time. Well, the last 100 or so years now.
Yeah, exactly, and that's another thing. The reason this is another thing that what they've done with religion and science. By separating the two, you have a lot of people now that are confused and believe that evolution is stood on its own, and no, creation stood on its own. No, they're combined, fools.
Yes,
and I'm sorry to call you. I'm not sorry, but forgive me for calling you fools. But it's just out of ignorance that you believe this. It's because it's been taken out of your sight. Here's the problem: if you're an evolutionist, or you don't believe in an intelligent design, let me explain. Let me ask you this question. Evolution came up. If you look at evolution, they have something that's called a missing link, and people have tried to explain this missing link and blah blah blah, so on and so forth. And that's fine. Let's say it died off, whatever. It just didn't have the capability to survive. But explain this to me. If evolution is true, and I do believe in a form of evolution, so don't get me twisted. If evolution is true independently on its own, then why is it that it takes everything millions of years to develop, to evolve, in your DNA, in your skin, and letting go of the tail, and our hair removal, and blah blah blah? Look at the size of the brain. The size of the brain tripled in a matter of 1,000 or so years. Tripled. Actually, more than tripled. The size of the brain more than tripled in a matter of a few thousand years. If evolution is true on its own, how did that happen? Can someone explain that to me? And if you say that didn't exist, then we shouldn't even be talking, because that means you're not up on your history and you're not up on knowledge. You need to get a foundation first, and let's have a conversation. Again, I don't have a problem discussing things with people that disagree with where we stand or where I stand, because I love conversation. I love to be proven wrong, because you know what? If I'm proven wrong, that means I'm now right. At least in that perspective. Indeed. I want to know. I have a thirst for knowledge. You know what I mean? Indeed. I don't have a thirst for power. I don't have a thirst for power. Sometimes that comes with knowledge, because I'm powerful over myself. You know what I mean? And that's what the guy was talking about that contacted you. Exactly. Power, you want to be sovereign, first you got to be autonomous. You have to get to sovereignty in order to be sovereign. In order to be a ruler, you have to first rule your own life. How are you going to tell somebody what to do outside of your house if your house is not in order yet? So you have to be
That's
autonomous first. You know, Yeshua, if you
all
believe
about
in
action.
Yeah, for those people that believed in Yeshua, you know, Jesus, and those that don't, then you can disregard this. But those believed in him, he had a development process to go through. People don't realize that. They don't even know his history. He disappeared at the age of 12, reappeared at the age of 29, and then all of a sudden starts speaking to people and teaching people and getting disciples and so on and so forth. Well, wait a minute. What did he do between the ages of 12 and 29? But they don't want to know. They don't want to know where he got his knowledge from.
I know what he was doing.
And yeah, we know.
You know what he was doing?
What's that?
Yeah, he was on Xbox. He was playing Xbox. And, you know, watching Kardashians and the family. And, you know what I'm saying? Trying to catch up.
He all of a sudden got enlightened. It's like, oh, yeah. You know, but you know what? In our reality, it's funny, but it's sad. Because the more the population becomes dumbed down, the more we have things like Iraq, the more things like we have like Libya, the more things that we have shoot, I forget the name of the... Forgive me for forgetting the name of this. There's this African nation now that's going through civil war or revolution or whatever you want to call it, but nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, it's a whole bunch of them.
You know, it's a bunch of it is a lot of them. And you know, you're talking about, okay, we're going into get Saddam. We were looking for weapons of mass destruction, but even though we didn't have them, we still got to get rid of him because he was killing all his own people, and we did the same thing with Libya. He was killing all his own people. Well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
There's people that are cutting people's hands off, cutting children's hands off. There was a picture that I saw, bruh, of a boy who was hungry who stole a apple so that he could eat it, not so that he could get rich, but so he could eat it. And they held this boy down and rolled a Jeep over his hand in order to break his hand because it's Sharia law.
Sharia law, and that's what folks want to live under.
And first things first, I don't care what law you have. People can decide what type of law they want to live under, but that law should first be compassionate. If somebody's hungry, feed them.
I know, come on.
You know what I mean?
That shouldn't even be no problem.
It shouldn't. I don't have a problem with with somebody being fed. If somebody, and as a matter of fact, again, not a Bible thumper. It's just happened so be that that was part of my history in school and curriculum. Is that one of the things that it says in there is that, look, if you're walking through a field, you have the right, or I'm giving you the right, so-called God said, I'm giving you the right to take enough to carry within your own pockets or your own self, but you cannot take a bucket, go to somebody's stuff, and then, somebody else's farm or field and take, enough to carry away in the bucket. But, if you're walking through, if you're a traveler, take a stalk off here, take a stalk off there, and then move it on. You know what I mean? But don't go rob that person. You know what I'm saying? But again, that person, if they saw you walking through, hey, go ahead, take a couple. Going about. It's just compassion. You know what I mean? We have to get compassion first. If we don't get compassion, we're done.
Yes,
we're done. If
and
all of us
sitting
sitting
on it because it's some evil folks out here.
Yeah.
I mean, the majority of the folks want to do good. I get that.
Well, you know what the problem with that is? The problem with that is that the evil people have a will and determination to put their evil, wicked ways or whatever you want to call it off on other people, but the good people sit back and do nothing. So that means that makes the good people subjected, and worse, it makes them compliant with what the evil people are doing. So yeah, the majority of people might be good, or at least have a good nature within themselves, but they're not good. They might have good intentions, but they don't have good foresight. Because if we had good foresight, we would stop giving this money to this military-industrial complex so they can go over and subjugate different people in the world, and expand this empire. Because that's all we're doing is expanding an empire. What do you think, Jay-Z?
Talk about how lovely this country is.
Oh yeah, and within it's great. But not the destruction that we cause. And don't get me wrong, I'm not an America or U.S. beater. I'm just saying that, hey, we got to get control of this. Because everything that's happened across the world, we are responsible for. Everything that we're doing to people across the world, we're responsible for. And the bloods are on the hands of the people.
Yeah, because it's reflecting back on you, us, me.
And I'll tell you, one other thing to the supporters or the occupants. Do first things first. If you want to end the Fed, first thing you have to do is you have to stop supporting the Fed. You have to take your funds out of there. I'll tell you this. A lot of those people out there walking that's talking about end the Fed, I've done more. I haven't gone out there, but I've done more than what they have because I took my money out of banks. I don't buy things by loans anymore. If I can't afford to pay for it, with the things that I have, the resources that I have, then I don't get it. You know, I got a car that's, you know, the cars I have are paid for. Any motorcycles, anything I have is paid for. I'm not paying on any loan. Now, I'm not saying everybody should live like that. If that's the way you want to live, then so be it. But then don't complain when they go do what the hell they want to do with the money that you gave them to enrich them. And the same thing with foreclosures. We're crying, they took our wealth. They took our wealth. No, they didn't. They don't have the promissory note. They don't have the promissory note to demand that you pay $140,000 for a house that's only worth, $75,000.
I know.
They don't. They don't have the promissory note. So you got all equity in your house. You got 100% equity. You just don't know it.
Yes,
Lack of knowledge destroys
That's it,
us.
right there.
But real quick, the EFT thing, which is taking over.
EFT, that's what it is.
You want to segue us into that?
EFT.
Yes, I think it stands for electric
funds transitions.
Right, transference, right. Well, back in the late 90s, right before we met, I had just gotten out of banking, and one of the places that I did work for was TransAlliance, which was the foremost, and actually I think it wasn't the only, because EDT, what's Ross Perot's his old processing company. Anyway,
his system.
His system. They were the only other processor out here, and we had a partnership with them. So they were only doing certain banks, processing for certain banks, whereas we did others. So I was the head of the MasterCard department and TransAlliance settlement department. And so one of the things I do have is I have experience in banking, internal banking. The communications between banks, and then I went over after that. I went over and worked. They were going through some management issues, and I didn't want to be a part of it. So I ended up going over to one of my clients, working for them. So I got to know a little bit, even a different perspective of internal banking. Over there, I worked again for a settlement department, but I mainly oversaw we went through a transition or conversion from the old DOS system when ATMs and stuff like that were using the DOS system.
Electric data system.
Right. Well, yeah, and then it started using the EPIC system, or the Windows-based system. What they did is we converted them over to Ross Perot's new system, which is the EPIC-based system. And so one of the things I know is a little bit about is some things about banking. And what's going on now is, everybody knows about the accepted for value thing that was going on, and that is where you take a bill and you convert it into a note, and you take their remittance, which is nothing but a check, that is true, it is nothing but a check, and you convert it into a note and you send it in to pay to set off your bill or to discharge your debt for anything that you owe. And it was working sporadically. I think, what's the guy's name that was promoting that? Not Tim Turner. You talked to him. You used to. I know. I forget his name anyway. Doug Riddle, I think.
Douglas Riddle.
Yeah, Douglas Riddle. And he promoted that for a while, and it seemed to work for him for some reason. But it worked occasionally. I got quite a few things, taken care of with it, but not everything. Some people were like, "Oh, what are you doing? You're crazy!" And I sent in all these memorandums and tried to get them to pursue even, legal procedures, and the courts wouldn't enforce it. And I'm like, okay, well, it's cool, but it ain't, it's not. I can't focus on that. I got to focus on bringing in resources because, bottom line is I still got to pass something along down to my children, wealth, knowledge, true wealth, not just riches off of Federal Reserve notes and blah, 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 or credits and debts. Anyway, so now because that wasn't working for people have now gone to use what is called electronic EFTs. And what they do is they write checks off of closed accounts, bank accounts that have been closed. And people have been suggesting, well, you need to look up, what closed accounts mean, and they went to Black's Law, and under Black's Law, it does say that, account that is closed or closed for credit and debit transactions, but still open for adjustments and set-offs. Well, people don't recognize what the word adjustments and set-off means to a bank. Look, people, I'm here to tell you. What that means is that, let's say you go in and close your account. Now, if you look at your account right now, a lot of people's account, what they do is they have a lot of regular ongoing transactions that come out of their accounts. You may have a cable bill that every month you have it automatically taken out of your account. You may have an internet bill, whatever the case is, you have it automatically taken out of your account. You may have things that come out of your account once a year. you know, or whatever the case is, or you may have post-dated a check or something to that nature, or somebody may have, you know, let's say, let's use Comcast again for a hypothetical. Let's say they realize 5 years later that, you know, hey, you close out your bill, but you still owe them $100, or they owe you $100. Let's say they owe you $100. And let's say you closed your bank account because you moved out of that town. You know, 5 years ago I closed my account, and the only thing they have on record is your card. And so they decide to send that money back to the card. You know, they said, okay, well, you know what? We don't have a way of getting rid of it. We don't have a mailing address, blah, blah, blah. We send it off to this card. Well, that bank has the opportunity now to adjust the account and say, okay, well, we got to keep it closed, but we need to adjust it. So we need to find out where they are and write them a check or tell them to come in and get this $100 because we need to have this balanced out. It needs to be zeroed. Okay. Same thing with if you owe them money. Well, we need to contact them because we need to get this money that they owe us because we need to balance this out at zero. Those were set-offs, and those what adjustments are. Now, what a set-off is or a charge-off or discharge is, let's say after 7 years you can't find them. Well, now they can write it off as a loss, and they can take it out of their taxes. 7 years. Yeah, profits and loss. So now they can take it out of their taxes, and they'll get compensated out of that, so they don't have to pay. You know, they don't have to pay a certain amount of taxes. That's what that means. Now, of course, that's a very simplistic explanation of it, but it does not mean that you can write a check on a closed account. Stop the nonsense. Come on, man. Okay, please stop that, because what that's going to do is get people put in jail.
And that's going to have to be the result, I would guess. And we're going to start seeing the result because I'm sure we'll hear it from down the line. Those of you who are listening to us, I'm sure you probably know somebody.
I really do. I hope the FBI is so busy that they don't get to them and they send them a letter warning, stop this before we have to come after you. But you got to think about this. When you put a letter in or a complaint into the FBI, and a bank puts a letter in or a complaint into the FBI or a larger institution, and they're really, really busy and they have to prioritize, who do you think is going to get higher priority? Your complaint or the bank's? Now, if they're similar, if the complaints are similar, now if one is actually, you know, hey, somebody's going around killing somebody, they don't have a choice. They got to go, hey, okay, but you actually need to send that to state, and then, you know, blah, 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 whatever. But anyway, you get my point. They'll prioritize it based on, you know, certain things, and if it's similar in stature, they're going to give theirs more. And the reason that they're going to do that is not just because they love banks, you know, please, they don't love banks, but they realize where their butter is fed. I mean, which side of their bread is buttered. And the banks give more money or I shouldn't say they give more money. They have one bank failing is worse, much worse to the economy than one individual failing. If you fail, there's 360, you know, well, again, in the working population, 168 other million people to back up what you just lost, and more coming into the fold. If there's a big bank that loses, there's only, let's say, 10 big banks? Just hypothetically, there's just 10 big banks. Yeah. Well, if one of those failed, then than that. Yeah, well, it probably is less than that because a lot of them are now merging with one another. They have, you know, joint ventures and so forth. Anyway, the point is that that bank failing has more of an effect on the economy than you, because you are not even 1%. That bank is 10% if there's 10 big banks of the economy. You see what I'm saying? So. You know, so the point is that they're gonna go after them first. So you both. When I say that the banks have committed crimes in trying to foreclose, and then you go do this EFT thing, well, both of you have committed crimes. And a lot of people say, well, you fight fire with fire. You know what? I told my mother this morning. I was talking to her. I said, you know what happens when people fight fire with fire? You burn the whole damn thing down that you were trying to save. Everybody gets burned. You don't fight fire with fire. You fight fire with water. You do. And you put it out with the quick. Now, of course, for my wonderful firefighters out there, I know there are some cases that you have to snuff out the fire and use explosives and stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay, we're talking about a very simplistic situation, and the majority of the situation, the majority of the time that you have to fight fires is you fight it with water. Okay. We're not talking about those exceptions. We're talking about specific. Generalization. And generally, you fight water or fire with water. Period. And you fight water with a dam. You don't fight water with fire. You know what I'm saying? That's, you know. So you got to be smart about this. But that's what we're trying to convey to people: is that you have to use the sense that you were given at birth, and that you grew and developed into, and you have to become your own leaders. Because if you don't, these people
Stop
that you're
always looking for these quick remedies too.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm talking.
Well, and that's what we're getting at is you got to study, you got to read. You know, we'll put out like again, if you go to Title 18 United States Code 242 or Title 42 United States Code 480. Well, no, that's wrong. Yeah, that's not wrong. That's wrong too. I can't think of which one it is, but it's Title 42. You'll see that there are certain codifications of what government or your rights and how they're protected, right? 241 and 218, 241 and 242 are really important because that's what you can use. Let's say if you ever get pulled over and you're on a suspended license and you get your car taken in, or you don't have insurance and you get your car, gets taken away from you. You know you can get your car back for free.
Yeah, a lot of people don't.
They don't know that. The way that you can get your car back for free is they go to the court and say, "Wait a minute, is the court a state? Is this a state entity that I'm dealing with, or is this a lower level federal entity that I'm dealing with?" Because if I recall correctly, what you've done is you've committed an in rem action, which means you've seized my property from me in violation of the constitutions of their prime directive, I should say. You seized my property from me without due process and without a warrant, and that is an in rem action, which is limited to maritime actions, which is exclusively limited to federal or Congress, to federal jurisdiction or Congress. So now the question again I'm going to ask you is, are you a political subdivision of the federal government, or are you acting as a state? And then let them answer it. They're not going to answer it. What they're going to do is give you your damn car back until you get out.
Yeah. Hurry up and get out of my courthouse.
Yeah, please hurry up and get out of my court. You're telling too much. They don't. That's why they always put people like us last when it comes to these court cases. But I've now learned how not to even go in and bother with them. You know?
And that's the key right there. That's key, brother.
I told you I got another parking ticket, right?
Yes, that's right. Now, you did say that.
I'll tell you this again. Me being autonomous or living autonomously, I do want to contribute to a point because, again, though I don't agree with the corporate aspect of the way that they're running government, I also know that if it all fails at once, you're talking about a big catastrophe.
Oh, hell.
Yeah, you're talking about a lot of people starving, a lot of children being hurt, and stuff like that. So I don't want that. But I am not going to support it overall, this system. So, I mean, I'll put money into the pay stall and stuff like that. And I came out. Now, this one, I came out much late. Oh, no, sorry. I came out, it was probably about 10 minutes late. So I was like, okay, when I got there, I knew there was going to be one because I was at the hospital. Knew there was going to be one. Okay, whatever. So I left it on there and then went back because I was going to put some more in the meter, and then because we were going to be that long. So anyway, I left it there. I came back, and again, I told you this happened to me in April, and I sent the letter saying that, hey, this instrument is invalid. I haven't committed anything wrong, and the instrument is a violation of due process because it says that I've been deemed to commit this infraction in part, and because I haven't legally done anything wrong, I'm not required to initiate a case against myself. If you feel that I have committed a crime, then you have the obligation to initiate one against me. And I sent the letter in, and I hadn't heard anything. I modified it a little bit, but I essentially did the same thing. Now, that one was here. It was only a couple of weeks ago. But the one back in April that I sent back, I never heard anything back from him. Never heard anything back from him.
That's cool.
And I sent this directly to, I put attention whoever the cop officer's name is. And you know what? They violate, by doing such things, they violate, their oaths of office. They don't, again, you just have to know how to ask questions. That's it. I shouldn't say that's it, but that's one of the main things. You got to know how to ask questions and how to put them into a corner for them to reveal who they are. Make them. It is your responsibility to know anytime that you're dealing with a government official that they are legitimate. It is your job. You know why? Because it's your subjects. Think about it this way. You got a house and you got a butler. You got a maid, you got janitor, or whatever the case is. And they all got keys to the service entrance or front door, whatever the case is. What if somebody walks into your house that you've never seen before, and they dressed up as the butler? Are you just gonna let them continue going on butlering?
No.
Or are you gonna question who the hell are you? Why are you in my house? Because you never know if they casing the joint. They're like, oh, he was off sick today. Wait a minute, I didn't hire you. Nobody told me. Get the hell out.
Exactly.
Get my key. Change all the locks. You know what I'm saying? You're going to jump on that quickly. But this is your house. This is your house, and you're not demanding that the servants say who, state to you who they are and make them prove that they are who they say they are. Just because a cop comes up in uniform don't mean jack.
Nothing.
I want to know who
It
you
don't
are.
mean
As a
nothing.
matter of fact, I told the cop that. I said, I don't know who you are. Just because you come up to me in uniform don't mean nothing. You know what he did? He got on the radio and called more of them. Do you question who we are now? Yeah, I still do.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to fight 20 cops, even though my uncle would. But these days, they'll shoot you. Back in this day, they would fight them.
Brother,
They used to wear them out. But anyway, that's another point.
And all you would have to do is just no retreat, no surrender.
Yeah. But the point is that, since I want to come back to my children, if they arrest me, you know what? I'm gonna get in front of a court. And if I don't get in front of a court, then my family and my friends are going to be like, hey, where's Nas? Hey, we demand that y'all bring him forward. And if they say, hey, habeas corpus has been suspended, oh, no, it has not. We don't have a rebellion. Just because you're at war does not mean that there's a rebellion. There's two different things. And what they've been trying to do with the Patriot Act is say that habeas corpus has been suspended because there's a rebellion. No, there is not. The people are not rebelling. They were allegedly attacked by some terrorists, 9 terrorists, so they say, who slammed some planes into a building. And they call it an act of war. Now, hold on. How are you going to say it's an act of war and you're saying we're under a rebellion? Which one is it? Are you saying the people are uprising? And if the people are uprising, real quick, and if the people are uprising, that means you need to shut the hell up and listen to see what they're uprising about, because that means they're pissed off about something. And since they're the boss and the boss stamps his foot, you better shut up and listen. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What you were saying?
Because if it was an outside, I'm just saying, it was an outside job. If you're claiming that was the people didn't engage it, you engage it. That's why they claiming it was a so-called.
Indeed. And so
it was them. So that's why they claiming it's
Indeed. And
it
so,
was an inside job, as Alex Jones said. It's an inside job.
And it was, but that doesn't mean that all the government was in on it. I mean, because
no doubt.
Governments are so compartmentalized. If you just look at the intelligence agencies, look at that movie Green Zone. I'm not saying that I don't know if you like it's kind of a combat movie. It's not really. It's just about Iraq and the intricacies of it. But one of the things it showed is that how the intelligence agencies and the Pentagon and the different factions of the executive office or the executive branch, are departmentalized, and how the right hand doesn't know what the hell the left hand is doing. They're not even on the same court. They don't even have the same mission. Sometimes they're repugnant to one another, and they even fight one another. So look at that, and you'll see that just because people say it was an inside job doesn't mean the entire government was involved. And for those people that blame, don't get me wrong, I didn't like George Bush and the policies that he created, or I should say that I didn't like the policies that he created, but he didn't know about 9/11. He couldn't have, not beforehand. He needs denial. What do they call it? Plausible deniability.
Yeah.
It would be
asinine. See how he was acting anyway when
it would be completely asinine. It would be the dumbest thing in the world for him to actually know what happened before 9/11 happened. It would just be so idiot. That would be just the sloppiest thing in the world. And I don't think that that's sloppy.
Yeah, I'm sure he probably had an idea.
I'm sure he knew afterwards that he knew, hey, this is our chance to make dough, and we know that it really wasn't them, but we're gonna move along with this because they'd be embarrassed otherwise. You got to think about that. The government is not going to say that it's not in control of itself. Even if there is, what they're going to do is going to have a media blackout. If let's say there's a rendition of the military that branches off somewhere in the States and they say, you know what, we're going to take this town over, forget this, we're not following President Obama anymore. They're going to shut that down. They're going to black out that media, black out the media, and they're going to go take care of it. And they're not going to let us know about it. And then they're going to require that everybody sign disclosures and not saying about it. And of course, people are going to talk about it, but then the government's not going to acknowledge it, or they're going to deny it and say, hey, they're cool.
Sure, especially when you got control of the media.
Exactly.
I mean, literally.
But hey, real quick, we're coming up on 2 hours here, so we're at 1:49 right now. Yeah, we had a long conversation, huh? Love to do it again, but I want people to make sure that they listen to this, man.
Oh, yeah. And then we could probably keep it down to about 45 at the longest. Try to hook it up later on in these next future.
Right. Well, no worries with this if they,
Yeah, it's all good. There's no limits. So,
again, Nasator, what is it called? Nasator Associates, look that up. Look up Trade and Business in the United States Code. I think we already gave it 267701. Look up What else are we talking about? Oh, if you're in Washington or even in your own state, look up if you're doing property taxes or paying property taxes. Look up the authorization for the state to demand or to receive property taxes and make sure that and make sure it's legitimate. I would suggest that it's not because it's based on a feudal law system.
And that's what it is, feudal law system. Period.
And the feudal law system is not not a legitimate system here. It's not.
Why you think they took out the land patents and?
Well, and the thing is, they didn't take out the land patents. People don't believe in the land patents anymore. But hold on, you got all these people. As a matter of fact, that's a good point. Real quick, you got all these people that saying, "Oh, land patents are a hoax. They're not. They're somebody shysting you." Well, hold on. Go to the BLM and try and put in land patents, and I bet you some things come up. I mean, we do our research based on the BLM. BLM, if you don't know, is Bureau of Land Management. And they let you research land patents. So don't tell me land patents don't exist and they're not legitimate, because, first of all, you can't say it's archaic law. When have we ever been, when has our law system been changed? We changed certain variants in law, specific laws, but we don't change the overview or the foundation of the law, because then that's when you change from a free democracy, or what we call democracy, a republic form of government, to a completely different form of government, and that's never been legitimized. Okay, we're still supposedly, allegedly under a republic, and until they want to actually come out right and just say, hey, we just taking this over, and we ready to battle for it, until they do that, we're under a republic. Not a democracy. And if you fall for that trick, then you know what? Good luck. But democracy is mob rule, and I think my people had enough of mob rules. We've come across a lot of mobs. I'm cool with mobs. I got something for a mob. I might not be able to get you all, but if you're gonna take me, some of you coming with me. I'm just saying.
Indeed. We're gonna all meet up in there.
Unless y'all coming to love me, and I was like, hey, I'll give you all your big hugs. You know what I'm saying? I love making friends more than I do enemies, but by all means, I'm not gonna let them take me out. But there you go, bro. Hopefully that was.
But it's all good. Nah, brother, that's how we got to do it. And we'll keep this up and get it going, man.
We'll probably try and keep it shorter next time for y'all, so you're not sitting here all day just listening to us yap.
Yeah, no doubt. Because we're going to be, like I said, we're going to get in some other subject matters that's going to make some heads turn. We always do anyway. So that's the good thing about it. We always making some heads turn, get some things going on. But we definitely want to hear from you. You got all the emails. You got us right here. We live on technoenthusiast.com. We live at My Sovereign World on WordPress.com. So you can get us everywhere. Don't give up your house.com. You can always reach us there for those of you who's having these home problems, even if you're not having these house problems.
You don't have to be going under foreclosure. You don't have to be going under foreclosure to stop them from stop paying somebody illegally. The whole point is that you don't owe them money. I don't care if you're behind or not. You don't owe them jack.
Exactly. So these are things we try to address. We do address so that you get an understanding of what's going on and understanding. And like I always say, do your own research. Definitely, you hear us, what we talking about, boom, boom, boom. Go out, do your own research. Go look at this stuff. And if we prove us wrong, that's what we want. Prove us wrong. We're out here. That's what we're here for. To learn and keep on learning. So,
because I want to be right.
Note,
I don't want to be wrong.
You want to say?
All I got to say, man, is look, it starts with you. If you want to be free, be free. Whatever you are is what you say you are. Or excuse me, whatever you say you are is what you are. Whatever you can or cannot do is true. It's what you can or cannot do. Period.
Exactly. You limit yourself.
Be masterful.
Indeed. And on that note, peace, love, and happiness. Protect.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.